What if you want to develop the most inhuman aim possible for Apex Legends? How would you do that? Go hit the firing range for hours, grind to the highest ranked in Voltaic benchmarks on Aim Labs and Kovacs, or sit in a modded version of Apex and aim train until your fingers literally fall off? Well, I've been asking myself this question for years, especially recently since last week marks my 1-year anniversary since switching to mouse and keyboard. But to this day, I still kind of fucking suck at it, which is why 1 week ago I hired Titanos, a professional aim coach who's helped some of the best CSGO, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, and even Call of Duty pros win literal championships. Now, we're still working on my whole aim journey to see how it's developing over a week's worth of coaching with him, but today I'm going to share with you the custom Apex specific playlist that he developed for me in Aim Labs to take my aim from this to this. In just 1 week. But there's just one major issue with what he gave me. This is an Aim Labs playlist. Aim Labs is meant to teach you technique, not mechanics. Well, today I took the playlist that he gave me and I found ways for you to practice these intense drills in the firing range, whether you're on console or if you're on PC, using the secret range that the pros don't want you to know about. Today, I'm taking Aim Labs and I'm putting it into Apex Legends. But before we hop into today's secret sauce, aiming isn't only about mechanics or technique. With longer internet latency or big ping, the things that you do on your controller or your mouse and keyboard takes longer to register in-game. To fix this issue for myself personally, I like to use GearUp Booster. GearUp is a software that you can use with both mobile, console, and even PC to direct your internet connection in the most straight path to the Amazon data centers. On average, I play anywhere from 70 to 90 ping on my own home servers on NA East. But with GearUp, I'm able to reduce that ping sometimes all the way down to 20 ping. GearUp doesn't help you just find your own home server though. You can also use GearUp to help you reach other servers across the world to play with friends and have a more stable connection. GearUp also has anti-packet loss settings to help you stabilize your connection and avoid losing that very valuable information as it's trying to reach the data centers. So if you want to level up your aim, movement, and most importantly, your connection, check out GearUp Booster today with the link in the description down below. All right, now the first role that my aim coach, Titanos, is giving me is Zack Sphere from Voltaic. And basically what this drill is a very fast moving target, which is constantly changing directions. And the main kind of focus on this is to, one, be flicking into the area that your target has been switching to, as opposed to just trying to constantly follow and track it. You're trying to flick on over to him. And second is you are trying to obviously be consistently pushing on your mouse or on your analog stick. What a lot of people kind of have a tendency of doing is they tend to kind of jitter and kind of like shake their aim like this, and they almost kind of are trying to preemptively guess the direction that their target's moving, as opposed to thinking about pushing their crosshair continuously until there's a reason to kind of change that direction. Now, obviously, we don't have anything in Apex, especially in the firing range, where we have targets that are moving all over in different circles, getting comfortable with all those different movements. But the main idea behind Zack Sphere, again, is to be pushing your crosshair in a consistent direction until you see that you need to change the direction of your crosshair. So what we can do here in the Apex firing range, for those people who are on console, if you're on PC, we'll actually hop into R5 Reloaded and we'll give you a PC specific thing for R5, unless obviously you want to practice inside of Aim Labs or in Kovacs. But for our console players, mostly for our PlayStation 5 players, because, well, you guys don't have Aim Labs on PS, what we can do here is we can hop into the very back of the firing range, right behind where the big balloon is. Come on over to where this tree stump is so that you can look over everything. And your goal is to practice following your target without shooting at first, and then with shooting, and to consistently push your crosshair and follow that moving target. And as you get more and more comfortable, you can switch to trying to track the head instead. And then as you get more comfortable, then you can think about using shooting as a way to kind of practice that mechanic. Now again, you're hopping onto the stump here so that you can practice tracking everything that is going on around you. And you can go from one target over to the next, go back to practicing following him in a consistent, smooth motion. And something that my aim coach has really had me focus on in specific, especially with whether it be large targets or even just smaller targets that are, that you're zooming in on, practice trying to follow the front of their body, or rather the leading edge of your target, as opposed to trying to follow the center or even the back of him. And the reason why you want to follow the leading edge is because it's easier to fall behind your target than it is to lead in front of your target. So by trying to follow the front of your opponent, what's going to end up happening is sometimes you're going to end up slowing down on accident, and you're going to actually fall into the center of his chest. This in general is just going to help give you a little bit more consistency with your tracking. And something that you're going to also want to make sure that you do is inside of your settings, you're going to change your dynamic spawn distance to close. This is going to make sure that all the dummies that you end up fighting, or every time that you kill one, it's going to spawn right next to you, and you're not going to have to like consistently go find new dummies. As you get more comfortable with this, what you can start doing is you can start adding a very short strafe on this tree stump if you're feeling very comfortable with that. Or you can start using a strafe right here and basically counter strafing. Counter strafing is pretty much just strafing in the opposite direction of your opponent. Get comfortable with this mechanic right here. And then as you get comfortable with that, you can also switch. I'm gonna get rid of this dummy. You can also switch into mirror strafing. Again, the front of your opponent. What we are also going to do, not only are we going to be practicing those kinds of drills that we've been talking about so far, like Zack Sphere in the range, but if you're on PC, then you also have the option to use the aim trainer inside of this modded version of R5. And you can do a lot of these drills inside of this modded aim trainer. Now, the aim trainer that we're going to be using is called Fast Jump Strafes, which, as you can kind of see, is actually kind of similar to Zack Sphere, where we have a target that's moving left and right, as well as jumping up, jumping down, and constantly changing directions. The way that we're going to actually set up Fast Jump Strafes is by heading on over into our Settings tab. We are going to change the shield level from red all the way down to no shields, or all the way over to white. Your goal here is to practice quick movements. Now, if you really want to make this difficult, there's nothing keeping you from switching this on over to red. But again, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is try to be consistent with these small, really fast corrections. It's not so much about having, huge mag dump, but more so being able to quickly flick on over and just, again, be consistent with your adjustments more than your tracking here. So we're going to switch this on over to white just for right now. Our dummy health is going to be 100%. And right here, you can also toggle the dummy strafe speed from static, from slow, normal, fast, all the way on over to demon. Now, demon is insanely fast, as you can probably guess. We are going to just start things off here on slow, and as you get better and you improve over time, you can slowly increase this towards that demon goal. Now, your dummy spawn distance does also matter. By default, or rather by default, it'll be around 4.2. For this drill, we're going to put it around 8. This should be about 8 meters away from us. I could be wrong about that though. You're going to set your invincible targets on over to disable. If you want to make it so that your target never dies and it's just constantly moving, very similar to how you kind of have it over here on Zack Sphere, where the target never dies, then you can easily, like I said, just keep it on invincible. Auto reload on hit, you're going to make sure is enabled, and then auto reload on kill is also going to make sure that this is enabled. Then what you're going to do is inside of your weapons here at the top of your settings, you're going to make sure that you pick 2 weapons that you want to practice with. In this case here, you can use something that has a very large magazine like the Havoc, the Alstar, Devo, Spitfire, Flatline, R301. You're probably going to want to work with something automatic. Something like the Volt would be fine. Prowler auto fire would be fine. Alternator would also be fine with the slow rate of fire. R9, however, if you start missing your shots, you're going to find that you have to reload a lot. So for the sake of this video here, we're going to throw on the R301. We're going to right click on the weapon to open up the attachments menu. And then from here, you can throw on different sights. Now, again, this is all going to come down to kind of like your personal preference here. For the sake of practice, we're going to make sure that whatever sight you want to use is fine. Your barrel is going to be off for recoil control. Your stock is going to be turned on, because this does not affect your aim at all other than your aim down sight speed and your weapon sway, but we don't need weapon sway because we're going to be shooting this whole time. And your magazine does not also matter because this does not affect your aim. It just increases your reload speed and your mag capacity. You can also equip a secondary. If this tab here is not showing, sometimes this is a bug. The way that you would fix this is escape, reopen it up, and then you'll see that it should pop back up. Now I'm going to add a second weapon here to practice, and I'm just going to throw on maybe something like a bolt or a close SMG. Laser sight, keep this off. Unless you want to put it on, that would be fine. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. Your stock is going to be make sure it's equipped, your magazine as well. And now we have a primary, a secondary to practice with. I'm going to just make sure that my primary has a 2x scope on it. That way I can practice a ranged engagement, and then I can also practice a 1x scope for a closer range engagement. Now we're gonna go back to our challenges, open up our fast jump strafes. And here you can see we have a target that is moving relatively quick in front of us, and this is very similar to what Zack Sphere would be like, where our target is jumping up and constantly changing directions. Now I'm just going to do this again with invincible target. Then as you can see, your target will never die. And every time that you hit your target, your gun will automatically reload. If I miss a whole magazine, I have to reload. But every time that I hit a target, my magazine will automatically update or reload. And then I can basically shoot forever, giving me the opportunity to just get infinite practice here on this dummy. And same thing here. Just the same as we were practicing over in Zack Sphere, where we want to make sure that we are flicking on over to our target as we see it change direction. And then we're trying to keep that smooth motion in on our target. We're not trying to stutter and guess the direction it's going. It's going to be the same thing here, where we're going to practice only moving our cursor as we see our target move. If you don't see your target move, you don't want to be moving your cursor. Now the next drill is Yuki Aim Tune Switch. This is a flicking specific drill, and the goal behind here is to flick into a target as hard as you can. And what is challenging about this is that they are constantly changing directions as they bounce off of the invisible walls. Again, you're trying to focus on here is not so much necessarily the tracking. Obviously, you're tracking to kill that target, but you're trying to read the target that you want to switch to next. So for instance, if I'm following this target here, I'm trying to shoot at him while reading this individual target right here. And I'm trying to flick into the direction that I see my next target moving to. Now, this is, again, not going to be as dynamic in Apex. You're not going to have targets that switch as hard, targets that are as small, and targets that are moving vertically, diagonally. You're still going to have the ability to switch from one target to the next. Now, same thing in here. There's a lot of little techniques that you can use to make this drill a lot easier, and specific things or techniques that go into aiming to help you with consistency. And that is going to be not trying to track your way over to your target and almost follow your target, but rather flick in front of the direction that you see your target moving to. This means that you're going to have to be paying attention, not just to the target that you're on, but also to the targets around you so that you know how you're going to flick your crosshair into that next opponent. When we come back on over to Apex, you can do the same thing by standing up on top of this rock and overlooking everything around you. Or again, you can kind of stand down here if you're going to start adding strafing to your shooting movements or to your shooting mechanics. But same concept applies. We're trying to track that front side of our enemy and then switch over aggressively to the direction that we see that next target moving. So as I start tracking this direction, I'm going to switch on over. and try to flick not just to my target, but in front of the direction that I see them moving. I'm going to start tracking forward here. I'm back. Now, the key thing here is, again, not to worry about being as insanely accurate, but more so focus on how hard and how fast you can switch from one dummy to the next. This is more of a speed type drill more than it is an accuracy drill. And as you get better, then your switching will get more accurate. And then you can start focusing more on holding that angle or holding that aim on your opponent. Now, to give us the closest resemblance to Yuki Aim inside of R5 Reloaded, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be using popcorn targets, which doesn't necessarily resemble a lot of that sideways movement that we get or the change of direction, but it gives us a lot more vertical practice in terms of practicing targets that are moving up and targets that are moving downward on a sideways angle. Very similar to here. Again, we just don't get the dynamic changing of the directions. And it's not going to be as quick as Yuki Aim. The way that we're going to do that inside of the playlist here is we are going to be clicking on popcorn targets. For popcorn targets here, the settings that we're going to be using, all of this here actually will not make a difference, but because our Yuki Aim balls actually have health, we will be disabling the invincible targets, and we will be playing with a lower health. Now, you can play, I would say, up to blue if you, again, want to work your way up to red. There is absolutely nothing that is stopping you from being as consistent with your aim as possible. But reminder, Yuki Aim is all about flicking over to your target. So we don't need to have a lot of consistency in tracking in this one. This is all about switching from one target to the next. So I'm going to focus more on a low shield. I'm also going to be using a weapon that is going to be primarily used for flicking and switching on a lot of, further distant targets maybe. So again, you can use something like an R301, any of the assault rifles. You may also want to use some of the different SMGs that maybe you're a little bit more consistent with, like a Volt. Auto Prowler is still a very consistent SMG for mid-range. Alternator is a really consistent SMG at mid-range, and so is the Volt, like I said. So I'm just basically going to keep my R301 2X and my Volt 1X. Come on back on over to popcorn targets. And now what you're going to see is that these targets will pop out of the ground towards you. And your goal here, again, it's not so much to be tracking the target as much as possible, but to be flicking very hard into that direction that you see your target moving. Your goal here is to track and flick hard onto the direction that you see him going. Almost trying to flick in front of your target. Now, if aiming with the 2x scope, it makes it very difficult to see the targets around you. You can always switch on over to a 1x to have a lot more visibility of your surroundings. Now, the next drill that we have is Voltaic StrafeShot, medium difficulty. Now, the medium is just, a personal difficulty for myself. This doesn't necessarily mean that this is what you would have to play if you were practicing this specific thing on Aim Labs or Kovacs. But, like I said, we were playing StrafeShot. Now, StrafeShot is a task where we're not necessarily trying to track and shoot our target as we see it moving, because as you can see, it's going to change direction on you fairly quick and fairly aggressively. That can be very difficult to try and track. Instead, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make micro flicks into the direction that we see our target moving. Now, this is less of a trying to predict where our target's going to move. We're not trying to flick onto that target. We're more so trying to place our crosshair close onto the side of our target and then micro flick into our target. So again, I'm trying to get relatively close to him, micro flick into him. Now for this drill here, we're going to set our dummy spawning distance to medium. That way we can make our targets a lot smaller, and that way when they make changes in direction, it's going to feel a lot more of a micro correction more than anything else. Again, this is more of like a micro flicking type drill more than anything. So again, I'm going to either stand here on my stump. Maybe you can also play over here. that you might have a better visibility over your targets around you. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're just going to try and not necessarily track our target, but we're going to try and flick relatively close to our target. And then from here, we're making our micro corrections onto our actual target. Now, what I forgot to mention about the strafe shot drill is that this is not as much as a speed drill as it is a accuracy drill. You want to make sure that you are getting as close to 100% as you can, making sure that you actually take the time to line up your shot. Obviously, you're going to want to maybe flick on over to where your target is roughly playing, but really take the time to land those shots on your target, whether it be in Apex or whether it be in Aim Labs. If you're rushing your shots, then all that's going to happen is you're going to miss. Remember, this is more of a accuracy drill than it is anything else. Now, as much as your aim is going to be developed by your efforts and willingness to dedicate even just a minimal amount of aim training, you can also help yourself fast track your progress by backing yourself up with the proper gear that suits your exact needs. For the longest time, I've had a horrible time with smooth tracking. My genetics literally are holding me back because of this. So I looked into and invested in a mouse pad and skates that would supplement an issue that I was having mechanically. And I moved from a control cloth pad to a speedy glass pad from Wallhack. Now, you don't need to use the same gear as me, but if you're on a controller and you're noticing that maybe you're getting a little bad stick drift, the tension in your sticks or the stiffness in your thumbs might be holding you back, then you might also want to do what I did. Consider upgrading your controller or mouse and keyboard with a more premium thumbstick or mouse pad. I'm going to leave a whole list of different brands that I trust and use personally in the description down below. And yes, disclaimer, they are affiliates of mine, so I do get a small percentage of any purchase that you do make, which helps support me and the channel to make content like this on the regular. But if you do know me, and by now I hope you do, you would know that I turn down brands all the time that I would personally not use myself, or that I wouldn't personally recommend to other people like my friends, colleagues, or people that I coach. So if you'd be interested in a whole gear list video where I break down my thoughts on different controllers, mice, pads, brands, and such stuff, leave a controller or a keyboard emoji in the comments and I'll post a video maybe next week about it. As well, all the links that you see in the description down below, you can get up to a 10% discount on all products at a minimum. And for all of my controller players, the Aim Controllers currently has an insanely massive sale right now where you can get a custom built controller with custom design on your shell, different color grips, thumbsticks, buttons, triggers, bumpers. You can get custom swappable thumbsticks. You can upgrade to digital triggers even. And my personal favorite upgrade, you can upgrade your analog sticks from the default Microsoft or PlayStation thumbsticks, which by the way suck, to Hall Effect or the newly released premium TMR thumbsticks. These things are Hall Effect thumbsticks on steroids. I'm not going to nerd out too much on this video about what TMR is, but if you want to learn a tiny little bit more, look at my last ALC settings video where I go into a little bit more detail about it. The best part is about this deal with Aim controllers is that you can upgrade your controller to the max for only $210. That's cheaper than a Microsoft Elite controller or a DualSense Edge Pro controller that only has 2 paddles. Like I said, all the links in the description down below. Now for our strafe shot, we're going to be using a target switching drill inside of the Apex Aim Trainer. And just like inside of strafe shot, this is all about your accuracy, meaning you're not necessarily trying to focus too hard on how fast you can go from one target to the next. Instead, what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus more on the strafe of our opponent and being as accurate as possible, making sure that we are reading the direction that our target is strafing and making those adjustments towards him. Now, it's important not to try and predict the movement that your opponent's going to make. He may have a long strafe followed by short, long, short, long. So it's more important to keep your cursor again close to the edge of where you think he's the direction that he's going to be moving, and then making those micro adjustments into your target. We're going to hop on over into our settings, and because this is something that is more focused on accuracy than it is on switching, you can, if you want, work your way up to a red shield, because this is more about consistency than anything else. So start low and work your way up. The dummy's health is also going to be on 100%. Your strafe speed can start off on slow as well. You can work this up as you want. And for starting off with something like a wingman, you can start off with an 8 value for the spawn distance of these dummies. If you're going to be using something like a mastiff or a shotgun, you can start lowering this all the way down to about 4. What that would look like is something relatively close to this. Now, I think I accidentally also turned this on demon speed, so keep that in mind. This is what demon would end up looking like on your strafe. Then same thing here, you're trying to flick relatively close into your target. Now, just keep in mind that these dummies do work their way in towards you. So if you're playing on demon speed, they will get really close to you really quick. Furthermore, in your settings, if you want to work on something more like a G7 with a 2, 3, or 4 times, or if you want to work on your sniper flicks as well, instead of playing on this with an 8, you're going to want to close to double this, anywhere from a 12 to a 16 or even a little bit more. This will be kind of like that range that you're going to want to focus on. For instance, we'll lower this to a 12. We'll change our weapon. We'll put the 2x4 on. And for all your attachments here, you're going to want to make sure that you're not using anything that will help you with your accuracy. So in this case here, now that we are focusing on weapons that have a lot of sway, for instance, the G7, we're not necessarily focusing on something like recoil control or switching, but more so micro flicking with fine adjustments. You are not going to want to put on a big stock, nor are you going to want to have a barrel stabilizer. So stabilizers off, stocks off, optics on, and magazines on. This would be a 12 value on your target switching. This is also on that demon mode setting. As you can see, they're starting to get closer here. If you want to make this as challenging as possible, aim for the head. And to finish off our settings for the strafe shot, we are going to want to make sure that invincible targets is turned off. We are focused on killing this target and being accurate with our kills. Otherwise, these dummies will just walk all the way up into us. Our auto reload on hit is going to be set to disabled, because again, this is more of an accuracy based challenge, not so much a flicking challenge, but an accuracy based challenge. And auto reload on kill will be enabled to reward you for killing that kill. You don't want to have to reload if you don't have to, but we do want to punish you for being inaccurate with your hits. Now, again, if you wanted to practice this with something like a sniper rifle, you could increase this to anywhere from 16 all the way to the max. No barrel stabilizers, no stocks, magazines on, and you can use whatever sight you want. Now, what's very important with StrafeShot is that you load onto King's Canyon. If you load onto World's Edge, there is a lot more terrain in front of you, meaning there's a lot more rocks, there's trucks, there's lampposts, there's a lot of stuff that will end up getting between you and your targets. Just like right here, you can see that this dummy is stuck behind the supply bin while these other ones work their way towards me. If you play on World's Edge, you're going to have a lot of that issue right there, and you won't be able to easily shoot these dummies. Now, the way that you're going to get to that custom King's Canyon from the old days, that OG KC map, is you're going to head on over to Create. You're going to create an aim training server by heading on over to Select Playlist. You're going to click on Aim Trainer, and then you're going to change the map to King's Canyon Season 1. If you were to play on World's Edge, like I said, there's going to be a lot of this type of terrain around you, and a lot of the area that you're aim training in is not flat ground, meaning the dummies will spawn on the bottom of a hill and they'll have to work their way up to, and you just simply will not be able to see them. Now, this one here is actually less of an accuracy drill. This is micro switch. This is a speed drill where we are trying as hard as we can to land in the 80% percentile range. And then as we kind of hit 80%, then what we're doing, as we're hitting 80% in terms of accuracy, then what we're doing is we're trying to, you know, keep pushing ourselves to go faster and faster while getting as accurate as possible. And once we kind of see that we're going above 80% in terms of our accuracy, then that's an indicator that we actually need to pick up the pace a little bit of our flicks, flick a little bit harder, flick a little bit faster. Now here, what you're really thinking about is making straight lines to your target. This is just a given with all of our drills. We're trying to make as straight of a line as possible and push our cursor as hard as we can to each one. Now, what's mostly important is how hard you are flicking from one target to the next and making sure that your stops are accurate and on target. You don't want to be flicking over and then adjusting. You want to make sure that you're trying to flick as hard as you can right onto each individual target. Now, obviously, if you need to make a correction, but this is more so of a speed drill for accuracy than it is an accuracy drill. So again, you're flicking hard over. If you miss, that's fine. Skip and go to the next. Now, coming back on over to Apex, we're actually not going to be using these dummies. Instead, what we're going to do, we're going to get these guys to spawn far away. And what we're going to do is we're going to be coming on over to this platform at the very top of the range, right above where you would be sliding on down into. And from here, what we're going to be doing with, obviously, we can't get these groupings as tight as we would like, but what we can do is we can, instead of using a 2x4 and having these really big flicks, instead what we're going to do is we're going to use a 1x2, or, you know, the 1x or 2x. I'm just going to use the 1x2. That way, if I want to toggle and have slightly bigger groupings, I can, or I can just use this 1x and have smaller groupings. What we're going to do here is the same thing. Now, one caveat to this is obviously there's going to be bullet drop, which is going to be a little bit of an issue. But if you're aiming for just right above where you should be aiming, then you will be perfectly fine. And what our goal here is same thing, because the groupings are a little bit smaller, it may take a little bit more time to one, get used to, and two, kind of line up that shot or flick from one spot to the next. But our goal here is having these flicks from one target to the next, focusing more on your speed and less on your accuracy. Now, what you can do for all these different drills that we're talking about is you can turn on your dynamic stats inside of the firing range. If you want to time yourself and see how well you're doing per minute, you can also turn on the timer as well. And then that way, as soon as you, yeah, it kind of just, I guess it just kind of goes for you here. Now you can take your time, or maybe not take your time, but more so, you know, take time now to actually start getting these shots. And then again, you can time yourself how long it takes you, or time yourself for a minute each drill, see what your accuracy is like. Don't worry so much about landing headshots. Really, these are super small targets. As long as you're hitting your shot, that's all that matters. If you're hitting those headshots, then that's even better. That's not necessarily exactly what we're aiming for. There we go. So in about a minute, I was able to hit 90 shots, do 2,000 damage, and I managed to hit 2 headshots with a 73% accuracy. Now for micro 3-shot, there are a couple ways that you can go about practicing. One is going to be the tile frenzy mode, which isn't as micro and instead has a lot more wide shots with a variety of up and down movements. And another version that you can use is going to be the target switching drill. Now, unlike the firing range, this is actually one where I think the firing range is actually a little bit better. The way that we can replicate this micro 3-shot is by using the dummies in a static running position and focusing on flicking and hitting headshots. So instead of aiming for bodies, you're going to be aiming to flick on over to those heads. Now, one of the issues that comes with using target switching is that you get these targets that are just super far away from you, which obviously we can control with the distance, but the main issue is simply the fact that they spawn so far apart. Now, you can correct this issue by getting them to spawn closer, and thus the radius, how wide that they kind of spread around you, is going to be a little bit more limited. but then your targets become significantly bigger. And our goal is to be practicing hitting these micro shots. Another option that you could possibly use is going to be floating target, which as you shoot, it will continuously be moving around. Although this isn't necessarily a micro drill, and this is more of a switching drill. Now, the way that you're going to set up your tile frenzy is you're going to hop on into your settings, obviously. You're going to change your dummy spawn distance to the absolute maximum. This is what's going to make the targets either smaller or larger. You're going to set invincible targets to disabled, auto reload on hit enabled, auto reload on kill enabled as well. Once you hop into your tile frenzy, again, remembering that this is a speed drill, your goal is how fast can you flick from one spot to the next. Focusing on that transition speed. And if you were to set this up for your target switching, which gives you a lot more targets and a lot smaller of a target, you would set this up by setting your spawn distance anywhere from 8 to about 10. You can make this a little bit more, but they will spawn so far away, it starts to become a little bit of an issue. I would honestly recommend 8 and prioritize hitting headshots. Invincible targets will be disabled. Auto reload on hit will be enabled because we're not necessarily prioritizing accuracy, but we're more so prioritizing speed, going from one shot to the next, one target to the next. As well, your dummy health will be set to no shields, and your goal here is to flick, if you can, from one target's head to the next, back and forth until you wipe what is within your visible range. Now, what I mean by visible range is, as I'm looking right here, I can see 1, 2, 3 targets. I don't want to go from this head all the way over to these heads because it is such a large movement. It is less of a micro than anything else. So again, I'm going to practice flicking from one head to that next. Then as I start killing targets and I change my perspective of what is actually in that visible range, then I can start adjusting to my newer targets. Find a group of new targets, 1, 2, 3, 4. And now my goal is to flick one target's head to the next. And to practice our sphere switch, what we're going to be working on here is going to be using the running targets playlist, or the running targets drill. And what we're doing here as well is we are going to be practicing focusing on the switch from one target to the next. We are less focused on the accuracy, and instead we are more focused on the speed at what we can flick on to that next target. No different than a lot of our other switching drills where it's mostly focused on getting from where we currently are to where we need to be as fast and as accurately as possible. It is no different right here. Now, the way that you're going to set this up in your settings is we are not necessarily focused on putting in tons of damage. We're more so just focused on that switching aspect from one target to the next in a moving sideways fashion. We're going to set this to no shields. If you want, as always, to work your way up to focusing on a more accurate thing while still including that main focus, then you can always still increase those shields. But again, the main focus with this drill is purely switching from where you are to where you need to go in a moving fashion. Dummy health, we're going to set to 100. Again, though, if you really want to focus on a more speed-oriented flick, then you can decrease this actually roughly to about 30. But that's going to start looking like a lot more of this flick motion here. In all honesty, I would actually recommend playing anywhere from 30 to 50 HP on your targets. Your dummy strafe speed can be anywhere from slow to fast. I typically put this on normal. This is going to be the most realistic speed that you're going to see out of most players. Although if you want to focus a little bit more on that consistent tracking and having more small adjustments, you can increase to fast or demon. But again, this is more of a switching drill more than a tracking drill. So again, focus on a more realistic speed. The That way you can focus on flicking over and holding that shot on someone for a small portion of time. Now your dummy spawn distance, you're going to actually lower this down from what we were doing earlier, which was about an 8. And say you're going to be playing on anywhere from a 4 to a 2. The reason why you would go so low is because they actually spawn really far away from you, even on a just because there are so many dummies that spawn. To make it work properly, they had to make them spawn further away from you. So again, like I was saying, that might not make any sense unless you do this, but anywhere from about a 2 to a 4 is going to be that sweet spot for this drill in specific. As always, your targets for this switching drill, going from one target to the next, is going to be set to invincible targets, or it's going to be set to disabled invincible targets as opposed to enabled, because we want them to die. We're going to be setting our auto reload to enabled, and we're going to be keeping auto reload on kill also on enabled. This way we can focus a lot more on just flicking over and hitting shots. Now, next up on the list, we got Voltaic Sphere Switch. This is also a switching drill, just like the micro switch, although this is a dynamic one where we are trying to track and switch from one target to the next. This is also a speeding drill. So when we think of switching, we're thinking of switching in two different ways. We're thinking of switching as in switching from one spot to the next and holding that angle on them. We're also thinking about how fast can we get from where we are to where we need to be. So this is less of an accuracy drill. This is more of a how fast, how hard can you switch over to where you're going. If you start having trackings where you're noticing that you're kind of taking your time and you're being accurate, well, then you're not doing this drill correctly. You want to make sure that you're pushing yourself to flick hard into your opponent. Now, just like how some of the other drills that we've talked about, your goal here as you're switching from one spot to the next is to be reading the direction that your target's moving, reading where your target is, and trying to flick in front of your target so that you can ease into your opponent. If you're flicking behind your target, you're going to be trying to keep up and track them and follow them. If you're flicking onto your target, you risk them, well, you risk as you get to your target, they keep accelerating, and as you decelerate, you fall behind them. So by landing in front of your target, as you go to track or as you go to flick, you can actually ease down into your opponent, making it so that they basically walk into your shots, giving you more consistency with your aim and your accuracy. Again, this is a switching speed drill more than it is an accuracy drill. So focus hard on pushing that cursor, that crosshair, as hard as possible. Now for this drill, what we're going to do is we're going to set the dynamic spawning distance to close. And what we're going to do, we are going to come on down to the bottom portion, the main area of the firing range. This way, what will happen is you'll get a whole bunch of dummies, hopefully that spawn directly in front of you. And then from here, you can practice using whatever automatic weapon you want, whether it be an SMG or an assault rifle. Now, something to keep in mind with all these drills is, especially a lot of these tracking ones, you can practice these drills at various ranges. The closer you play, the harder it's going to be in terms of speed and in terms of larger movements. The closer you play, everything seems to be moving across your screen a little bit faster, versus the further away you are, things move across your screen a lot slower, demanding a lot more precision and accuracy. So by playing closer, we can force speed and larger movements. By playing further back, you can force a lot more precision in smaller micro adjustments. So keep that in mind when you're trying all these different drills. Don't just do them at one distance. Find different distances in that area that we're practicing in to force a certain narrative. Now again, from here, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be playing with the 1x. You can also use the 2x if you want. Again, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, in a lot of your gunfights, a 1x at close range can feel like a 3x at mid range. And then from here, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be practicing switching from one spot to the next. You're not necessarily trying to pick up a kill on these dummies, maybe because the time to kill is very long, or actually what we can actually do is we can go back into our settings and we can actually change the health all the way down to a common shield. And now that we have a common shield, as we kind of switch from one person into the next, as we switch from one person to the next, you'll be able to pick up those 1 mags a little bit easier and have more time to actually switch. Now, again, if you want to start kind of timing yourself and you want to see how accurate you're doing overall, what you can do is, again, turn on your dynamic stats, turn on your dynamic timer, and then you can start timing yourself. I think the timer starts once you aim down sight. And to practice our sphere switch, what we're going to be working on here is going to be using the running targets playlist, or the running targets drill. And what we're doing here as well is we are going to be practicing focusing on the switch from one target to the next. We are less focused on the accuracy, and instead we are more focused on the speed at what we can flick on to that next target. No different than a lot of our other switching drills, where it's mostly focused on getting from where we currently are to where we need to be as fast and as accurately as possible. It is no different right here. Now, the way that you're going to set this up in your settings is we are not necessarily focused on putting in tons of damage. We're more so just focused on that switching aspect from one target to the next in a moving sideways fashion. We're going to set this to no shields. If you want, as always, to work your way up to focusing on a more accurate thing while still including that main focus, then you can always still increase those shields. But again, the main focus with this drill is purely switching from where you are to where you need to go in a moving fashion. Dummy health, we're going to set to 100. Again, though, if you really want to focus on a more speed-oriented flick, then you can decrease this actually roughly to about 30. But that's going to start looking like a lot more of this flick motion here. In all honesty, I would actually recommend playing anywhere from 30 to 50 HP on your targets. Your dummy strafe speed can be anywhere from slow to fast. I typically put this on normal. This is going to be the most realistic speed that you're going to see out of most players. Although if you want to focus a little bit more on that consistent tracking and having more small adjustments, you can increase the fast or demon. But again, this is more of a switching drill more than a tracking drill. So again, focus on a more realistic speed. That way you can focus on flicking over and holding that shot on someone for a small portion of time. Now, your dummy spawn distance, you're going to actually lower this down from what we were doing earlier, which was about an 8. And instead, you're going to be playing on anywhere from a 4 to a 2. The reason why you would go so low is because they actually spawn really far away from you. Just because there are so many dummies that spawn, to make it work properly, they had to make them spawn further away from you. So again, like I was saying, that might not make any sense unless you do this, but anywhere from about a 2 to a 4 is going to be that sweet spot for this drill in specific. As always, your targets for this switching drill, going from one target to the next, is going to be set to invincible targets, or it's going to be set to disabled invincible targets as opposed to enabled, because we want them to die. We're going to be setting our auto reload to enabled, and we're going to be keeping auto reload on kill also on enabled. This way we can focus a lot more on just flicking over and hitting shots. Now, the next drill that we have is VT UFO, or again, Voltaic UFO. Voltaic UFO is very similar to Zack Sphere, where you have a ball that's constantly changing speed, except this one forces you to flick aggressively over to that next target, followed by tracking. Where a lot of people seem to go wrong with this drill is they track their way slowly over to their target instead of hitting a very aggressive flick. So for instance, what people will do, instead of having a massive flick like that, what they'll do is they will slowly kind of drag their cursor over, and then what will happen is they'll feel like they're just falling behind all the time. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is, as we are feeling that target, or as we're seeing that target flick, think about forcing yourself to have a very aggressive flick into the direction that you see. This can be very mentally challenging, but as long as you're forcing yourself to think about that idea, okay, when it moves, I'm just flicking insanely hard onto it, it'll slowly get easier and easier. Now, what I like to do for this VT UFO, again, you don't really have dummies that will just flick off into a different spot and it's going to force you to get over there, but you can imagine that you're kind of changing from one dummy to the next, almost. And the way that I kind of like to do this is playing in an area. You can do this in a whole bunch of different spots. Play in an area that has lots of low flat ground and then medium and higher grounds like these. And then what you can start doing is as you are shooting, you can practice hitting a massive flick over to where you know a target or enemy is. So pay attention to what's going on around you. I know there's a target here, here, and here. So as I'm fracking over here, I can pretend that he switched and he moved down here, and I can practice hitting a big flick over here. No different than if I'm fighting a team and I know there's a player playing over here, I know there's a player playing over here, I can be shooting here and then hit a massive flick over into that area. And then once you get to your target, focus on tracking him to death. Now for Voltaic UFO, there's two different ways that we can practice this drill. VT UFO is more of a flick-oriented drill into the new position of your target. So this is, as much as this is an accuracy drill, this is also a very flick-heavy drill. There's two tasks inside of R5 that are very flick-heavy with smooth, consistent motions. One has more of a flick-heavy motion with very short strafes, and then one has more of a strafe focus with very fast but short flicks. There's not too much that we can get that is very resemblant to VT UFO unless we were actually to practice inside of Aim Labs. Now, for this first one that we're going to be using close, fast strafes. This is going to be a very strafe-heavy task with some very fast flicks, although the flicks are not as large and they're not nearly as fast as fast jump strafes. Close fast strafes just has longer strafes in general, which is something that we see a lot in VT UFO. When we go back and we look at VT UFO, one thing that we see is that it has very large flicks, but it has very long strafes for you to practice once you actually get to your target after your flick. So when we hop back into close fast strafes, what we're going to be focusing on here is flicking onto where you see your target and then hitting that smooth track on your opponent. Something to keep in mind here as we're shooting is that we are trying to flick hard to where our opponent is, and we're not trying to predict the next strafe that he's going to make. Instead, we are tracking that target until there is a reason to change that direction. The way that we're going to set this up inside of our settings is we are going to set the dummy strafe speed to fast. VT UFO is a very fast strafe. If you're finding that fast is too fast, there's nothing stopping you from lowering it and slowly increasing to this speed. If you're finding that fast is a little too easy for you, then you can always increase this over to Demon. Now, our goal here is to have fast strafes. Strafes get faster the closer that they are to you. They tend to cross your screen a lot more the closer that something is to you. So we're going to be playing with a maximum here of 4. If you want this to be a lot tougher, even though the target will get larger, he will cross your screen significantly more. You can decrease this all the way down to about 2. I'll show you what this looks like here really quick. You can see now that he is a lot closer, and having to track something like this, it's going to really force you to focus on your flicks. For our health here, we're going to set targets from disabled on invincible to enabled. This way we can just keep shooting infinitely on them. We're also going to set our auto reload from disabled to hit. That way, every time we hit that dummy, it's just going to instantly reload our guns. Then auto reload on kill doesn't matter because we actually can't kill him considering he is now set to invincible. Now, the second way that you can practice this by using the fast jump strafes, which is going to give you a lot more of that vertical flick movement that we see in VT UFO. The only issue that we're going to get from this drill is that the strafes on this drill aren't very long, and instead they're very static. As you can see, once we kind of land into a position, there is very small movements that actually get made here. Now, for the settings on this drill, we're going to keep them very close to the same. Our spawn distance is going to be anywhere from 2 to 4. Invincible will be turned on. Auto reload on hit will be turned on, and auto kill does not matter. Your strafe speed also should be set to fast. If that doesn't work, slow, work your way to normal, work your way to fast, work your way eventually to demon. The health does not matter because it's invincible, and the dummy shield does not matter. Now, going back to your weapons, however, this somewhat does matter. This is going to be a lot more of a tracking-based drill with flicking incorporated in it. And this is both for close fast strafes as well as fast jump strafes. You're going to mostly want to be using automatic weapons. RE45, Bolt, R9, Alternator, Prowler, Havoc, any of the assault weapons or any in general of the automatic weapons is going to be your go-to. Your sights does not matter, anywhere from a 1 to a 2x. If you want to use 3x's and 4x's, you can always push that dummy back from a 4 maybe to a 6 to an 8 range instead of a 2 or a 4 range. For hop-ups, this is honestly preference, I guess. Your stocks do not matter. Your magazines do not matter. However, I would not be including anything that affects your recoil control. That would be something like a barrel stabilizer. Keep that off of your gun and focus on that recoil control while you're flicking and while you're tracking your target. Now, next up, we have Load to Immortal. Now, this is actually bugged in Aim Labs, so if you try to use it, you're just going to have a lot of issues. You can still play the actual task, but it doesn't really record your scores for whatever reason. I don't know if that's just a bug on my end or what, but it hasn't been recording for me for about a month. Now, what we're going to be doing here on Load to Immortal is, again, this is like a micro switch drill where we're focused on flicking as hard as we can to that next spot, except unlike our switching drills where we're focused really hard on switching and how fast we're transitioning from one area to the next, you're more so focused on how fast does it take you to go from just one singular target to the next. Don't worry about rushing, going from here, here, here. Worry about having a big fast flick from here to here. And then you can take your time and wait until you're ready to go again. Here to here, here to here, here to here. And then if you're comfortable, then you can increase how long it takes you to flick from one spot to the next. What that might start looking like is, instead of going like that, instead you're gonna have like that. Take your time until you're feeling more comfortable picking up that pace. Again, you're more so focused on hitting a big flick into where you're trying to go, not so much rushing getting to that next target as soon as possible. Take your time and then you can increase that in the future. Now, what we want to be focused on here is hitting raw flicks, meaning one spot, no adjustment. Obviously, if you're needing to, you can still micro adjust, but our goal is to work towards getting so close to that target that we don't need to make any micro adjustment onto it. Now, the way that you would be practicing this is by coming back on over to where we were before. Instead of using the one-time scopes, we're going to be using a 3x, a 2x, or a 4x. And same thing here, your goal is to flick really hard from one spot, whoops, to the next. And practice your speed from one spot to another. Now, if you don't want to use an assault rifle, you don't want to use a semi-auto like marksman rifle, what you can also do is come on down, swap that out for something like a wingman. You can come on over here and then you can practice the same thing with these larger targets. Now, something that you want to make sure you don't do is go from one to the next. That doesn't practice anything. That practices moving in one direction from really small movements. Instead, if you want a pattern, you can practice middle, small, medium, large movement, large diagonal, medium, large diagonal, small movement, medium movement. That can be a solid pattern if you want to practice. It gives you lots of ranges from sizes of movements, gives you different directions, diagonals, lefts and rights, or you can just mix and match everything and you can just pick a target that you want to flick to preemptively. Don't just randomly shoot one spot to the next, because now you're kind of just guessing. Instead, have an idea. I'm going to go from here to here, here to there. And then from there, you can focus on, again, your speed of how hard you're able to flick to one spot to the next. And again, as well, you can also go back to a marksman, put it on a 1x for a faster rate of fire. That way you can push how fast you go from one target to the next. And you can also put on a 2x to force larger flicks. And that way, if you're on mouse and keyboard, you can get comfortable playing with the center of your pad. Or, if you're on mouse and keyboard, you can get comfortable playing with the outer edges of your pad. Now for load to immortal, we are going to be using the target switching drill, and we are going to be going back for 1 HP dummies and focusing on wide flicks. This is very similar to how we set up micro switching, except instead of focusing on hitting shots on targets that have health and bouncing between them that are within your view range, instead what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing more on hitting heavy flicks with these wide movements. Now, the way that we're going to set up our target switching drill inside of our settings, we're going to set our shield level to 0, our dummy health to 0, our dummy strafing speed to static. That way they move absolutely none, just like how they would in load to immortal. Our dummy spawn distance is going to be around a 6. You can play around with this to make the targets spawn a little bit wider or a little bit tighter, depending on the range that you're trying to focus on flicking. Your invincible targets are going to be set to disabled. That way you can actually benefit from the 1 HP shots and flick from one big spot to the next. Your auto reloads are going to be set to enabled. Now, this is also a speed, but at the same time, an accuracy set drill. So we're actually going to disable our auto reload on kill. We want to focus on having very accurate, fast, hard flicks. This is not necessarily how fast can you bounce around from each individual one. It's how fast can you go from one to the next. Now, Bounce Gallery is a drill that is up next that we did not include inside of our console training routines. And that is purely because you cannot train this in any way, shape, or form in the firing range, unfortunately. If you are on console, though, you still have the opportunity to be playing this aim trainer. As long as you're on Xbox, you can still download Aim Labs, and you can actually play this on your Xbox. This is compatible with controller, so if you're on PC or console, you should be able to play this. Basically, what Bounce Gallery is are these targets here that will obviously bounce up and down, and your job is to flick on over to these targets and shoot them out of the air. This is very resemblant to something like an Octane jump pad, someone jumping off of a ledge down towards you, or just in general, someone falling off of a roof or horizon lift, anything like that, someone jumping up into the air and you're shooting at them. Anything that involves vertical movement, this will help you with those flicks into those enemies. Now, the way that we're thinking about Bounce Gallery is that there's an imaginary horizontal line that crosses your screen. And our job here is to be flicking along this horizontal line that these dots travel within. These dots will typically stop around this range right here. And your job here is to flick within that range and catch them in these movements. Something to keep in mind is that targets move faster going up than they do coming down. So most of your flicks should be catching targets at the top where they pause, or on the way down when they're moving at their slowest speed. The way that my aim coach kind of taught me how you should be thinking about aiming in this routine, the technique that you are going to be using, is you're going to be flicking into that direction that you see your target moving. You're reading what your target's doing, and you're calculating the arch that it's making. Now, the way that I calculate the arch and how it's going to go is I take the length that it's traveled to its top, and then I add that to its descent. So if a target is going to move, let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares using this grid here to the left, then at the top, it's going to drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares at the bottom. So I use that as a rough way to kind of calculate roughly where my target is going to be landing. And that will help me catch those targets at the bottom or kind of help me catch it at the top. As well, what we're doing here is we're flicking over to our target, and then we're making those micro adjustments to where our target actually is. You'll see a lot of the time here, especially if my editor stunning here slows it down, I'm flicking on over to where my target is, and then I slow down rather, and then I micro flick myself into that actual target. Now, the drill that we're going to be using for this here is we're going to be using popcorn targets with a health change to our targets. Now, the only issue here that we kind of get out of using popcorn targets is that we don't get that very nice sideways motion, but we still do get this vertical and slight sideways motion from our dummies. The way that we're going to set this up in our settings is we're going to set our dummy health to 1 HP. We're going to take the shields off. That way, he doesn't have an extra 25-50. He's just going to be straight 1 HP. Our strafe speed is going to be set to normal. And our spawn distance is actually going to be set to something like a 2 or a 2.5. If you spawn them too close, they spawn inside of your body sometimes. And when they get launched, instead of getting launched up into the air, they actually just get launched like straight forward. And it's just a weird bug. So we're going to put this at about a 2. Invincible targets, it's going to be disabled. That way, all of our targets are one shot, just like inside of the drill over on Aim Labs. Our auto reload on hit is going to be enabled. And because one shot will kill our targets, we're going to disable auto kill. Now, PSOM Free Think is also a drill that I did not include for console players, and this is simply because this is a drill that you also will not be able to really replicate inside the firing range. Even though this does have a lot of sideways tracking, which we can get, it does not, the firing range doesn't have any tracking for dummies that moves diagonally, forwards, left and right, as well as backwards. You won't ever have targets inside the firing range that actually end up floating behind you. Kind of like how this target right here is going to bounce and work its way behind me and then back in front of me. You're just never going to get anything like this. Now, Free Think is also a flicking heavy drill, meaning we are focused a lot here on that flick rather than anything else. Really, all we're looking for here is getting from where we are to where we want to be. It's very similar to a lot of the other track flicking drills that we've done so far, where again we're just focused on that hard flick into our target. The reason why this one is a little bit different for PC players, and the only reason why this is included in my aim training routine, is because it forces you to go from flick onto things that are moving away from you in a certain motion, meaning that they're going to get slower, and then it forces you to flick onto targets that are also coming towards you, which means that your target will progressively get faster and faster as it comes and goes across your screen. Now, believe it or not, this is actually a drill that you can replicate fairly well inside of the aim trainer, inside of R5 Reloaded. This doesn't necessarily work as well, obviously, as Free Think does inside of Aim Labs. However, you can replicate this pretty decently sometimes. The way that we're going to do this is we're going to be using the running targets drill. And the way that we set this up in our settings is we're going to be changing the shield level anywhere from 100 HP on white shields or simply 100 HP with no shields. Your dummy's strafing speed can start off on normal. However, it would be amazing if you could work it all the way from fast, eventually over to demon. Your spawn distance is going to be set to the absolute lowest setting. Remember, for whatever reason, with running targets, your dummies actually spawn a lot further from you than they would on any other drill. So by getting them to spawn on the lowest distance, as they're running forwards, backwards into you, or left and right, they'll actually be at a more realistic distance, very similar to how Freethink is on Aim Labs. Your targets will not be set to invincible. That way you can actually kill them. Auto reload on hit will be enabled. This is not necessarily a tracking drill as it is a switching drill. An auto reload on kill will also be enabled. That way you can make sure that you get your reloads back. To be honest, that actually doesn't even really matter because every time you hit them, you'll get reloaded anyways. Now you can do this both with the 1x and the 2x scope. Again, this is more of a flicking drill more than anything else. And our absolute last drill that we have on Aim Labs is our leap. Now this is very similar to Bounce Gallery, except the targets move a lot wider as you can see. They make a full 180-degree turn around you. And as well, they don't just move away from you, move sideways from you, they also move into your face oftentimes, with very fast, large movements. Now, this is something that I've tried to replicate a lot inside the firing range. Obviously, it's completely impossible. As well, this is almost near impossible to replicate on R5 Reloaded, simply because there's just nothing that moves this wide, this fast, and as well, doesn't just move away up and down from you, but also moves into you. So that right there is my Aim Labs playlist that I use to practice myself. If you don't have the option to use Aim Labs, or if you want to build mechanics, aiming mechanics, not just aiming technique that you would benefit from Aim Labs, but actual aiming mechanics that you would benefit from in the actual game. This would be things like recoil control, 1 to 2 times scopes, different weapons having different types of kicks, and weapon sways, and aiming down sights, and different target speeds from the dummies. You would be able to take all of these different drills that we have in Aim Labs and apply it to your firing range in your R5 Reloaded. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. I'm going to be posting an aim journey of mine that I've worked really hard on, going from my 0-year experience on mouse and keyboard to my 1-year mouse and keyboard experience. And as well, like I said at the beginning of this video, I recently hired a professional mouse and keyboard aim coach, and we're going to be uploading that coaching session soon to YouTube, as well as how I focus on progressing my aim from where it was just a few months ago to where it is today after just 1 week of training mouse and keyboard. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next guide, my friends. Remember, don't quit. It only gets easier from here.